around 84. Married in Miami in December of 1986, Neil earned his Master of Divinity in Missiology at the Pentecostal Theological Seminary in 1991. He became an ordained bishop in the Church of God in 2000. The Lawrences are also board-appointed career missionaries of Church of God World Missions since 1991. So we have career missionaries here. It wasn't just a missions trip. These folks have been in it for a long time, and we give honor to them for that. They served in Kenya, East Africa, for 29 years. 29 years in Kenya. That is incredible. They had an amazing ministry there. They also served in the Caribbean for 3 years. Was that kind of a reward for serving in Africa for that long? I guess not sure, but that sounds also incredible. They are currently serving under appointment from the Church of God internationally as international missionary educators. And that was from 2002 until present. While ministering in higher education in Kenya, training pastors and ministers, they formed Eagle's Wings Gospel Team and did 184 outdoor gospel crusades with large format equipment featuring lively African praise and worship music. They ministered through multimedia by building an audio-video studio, a very cutting-edge, before their time, medium, and created a variety of Christian content, including a 30-minute television program called A Higher Place, which can be found on YouTube. To formalize his study in Christian apologetics, Neil completed a doctorate degree in apologetics at Southern Evangelical Seminary in 2026. His dissertation project was Jesus in Islam. Joshua, their only child, was adopted as an infant in Kenya. He is now 23 years of age, studied at Lee University, and works in North Carolina today. In January of 2025, they moved their base to Stuart, Florida, where they travel to various countries on short-term missions trips, teaching and preaching at Bible schools, seminaries, with plans to make a home studio to create more online content from Stuart. Neil and Jennifer are members of the Ascent Church in Stuart, Florida, since May of 2025. So we are honored to have my brother and sister-in-law, Jerry and Karen, my mother as well, and my brother's always here. Jerry and Karen have been missionaries as well, and we're so excited to have them from Alabama. Welcome. But we are also wanting to say today that we are so excited to have the Lawrences. Brother Neil, Sister Jennifer, we welcome you. Would you give them a nice warm welcome?
We had traveled 2 days' journey from Eldoret, the city where we were based in, where the Bible school was. And Saturday morning, woke up in the cab of the truck, and my eyesight had started to go. And there's a long story to it, but just simply to say that people kind of ask me what's it like, or they think maybe I need glasses. It's not a focus problem, it's a light problem. So this picture here on the left is my team and I in that same place, and 10 kilometers from the Congo border. We're setting up. And then a couple days later, my eyesight became like that. The picture on the right is the same picture, but that's how I see. So I can't see any of your faces. So if you're not happy with what I'm teaching today, I won't know. I'll just keep on going, okay? And another thing that happened is that I only see in shades of black. So I went to Uganda, 2 days journey from our home. And I had a tall, redheaded, light-skinned woman, and I came back and she was a Kikuyu, which is one of the tribes there. So everybody I know is African. So, Pastor Mark, it's great to be an African pastor from my perspective. So, this topic is my dissertation, Jesus and Islam. And the idea is it's a two-track view of Islam and the best way to counteract Islam and reach Muslims with the gospel. So the idea of the two-track is what's kind of unique to kind of what I was putting forward. And that is you can't really understand Islam unless you understand what they say about it, their history, what they call the standard Islamic narrative. And that was coined by a Muslim scholar and Christian apologists have run with it, including myself. It's all in my dissertation. Standard Islamic narrative, S-I-N, okay? So it's their sin, and so that is what they say about their history, but their history actually doesn't add up. And we're going to be seeing on the second session, we're going to talk more about that. But in order to realize that the evidence that is actually there historically doesn't add up. And so that's the second track. Now you can understand Islam to undermine their history. So not only are they wicked, as we've been seeing, and as more and more people are learning, as people are now starting to talk about it, but also their history is fake. Fake news, fake Islam. Okay? So let me start out by saying that the capital of the Roman Empire had shifted from Rome over to Constantinople, and that was the Eastern Roman Empire, the Christian Roman Empire, which ruled for 1,000 years even after Rome fell in the West. This is the part of the history we're never taught in school. We go from the Bible to the Roman Empire and then European history. We forget about the Byzantine Empire. This was kept on going. And so Constantine shifted the capital from Rome to Byzantium. The city was known there near the entrance to the Black Sea, and then changed it to Constantinople. And so it had some massive walls around it, and people could not penetrate it. And before the Muslims did, in 1453, 1,000 years later, there was a massive earthquake that broke down a lot of those walls. And Attila the Hun was roaming around, and he was coming to threaten to enter the city. And so the emperor, this is now a later emperor, he was trying to motivate the people to rebuild the walls, and he couldn't get the young men because they were so busy with sports games. Racing, they love to race chariots, the red and the green team, and so they wouldn't listen to him. All they could think about was their sports. And so then he got the bright idea of challenging them to give one section of the wall to the green team and another section of the wall to the red team, and then they could fight it out to see who could build the wall quicker and gain glory for their team. And so they took up the challenge, and the walls had taken 9 years to build. They rebuilt them in 60 days. And Attila the Hun turned around and went and attacked Rome instead another time. Rome had been sacked several times, So he saved the city from being attacked by the barbarians out from the Asian steppe. So we find ourselves today in a similar situation where people are so dedicated to their sports teams that they're willing to even sit in a stadium with freezing cold ice all over their bodies. And they think nothing of it. If they would just have that same kind of zeal for building the kingdom, we could evangelize the world in no time. Amen? And so we're facing a similar situation. Everybody's entertained to death that we don't realize that enemies are at the gate. You can go to the next slide. Enemies are at the gate like they are in Europe. There's a Trojan horse entering in, and they don't make any, they don't hide who they are when they march around in Europe on the city streets and they bow down and pray on the city streets. That is a cultural statement of power when they do that. And so they say stuff like, Europe is the cancer and Islam is the answer, and all kinds of stuff like Islam will dominate the world, and that is their goal. And even like in 1 year, England can lose 500 churches, and they build 423 mosques. And some of the buildings, they just buy the church, and then they start using the church, which is really like a desecration. You may say, well, that's in Europe. We have no issue. In the United States, it's the same issue. In fact, a recent statistic was showing that for a period of 10 years, they built 80 mosques in the United States. That's 800 mosques. And that was just a period of 10 years. There's more coming. And there are even enclaves in different parts of the United States. This doesn't even show, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and all that. So I recently heard that the mayor, a Muslim woman, ran for mayor of Ocala, and she lost, but she got votes. And so that was even like 5 years ago. So we have to really realize they don't use spiritual means to grow. They use political and earthly means and high birth rates and immigration in order to take over areas. And they've always done it. It's not like they just started doing it. They've always done it for 1,400 years. So this particular seminar is meant to try to help you, give you some ammunition that you will be able to learn about Islam, and then also feel comfortable to talk to a Muslim. And I've heard different people that I know, like I think it's a big church here in Florida, Church of God. It's over in Tampa. They have a mosque just down the street. So it is in our midst, and it's no longer at the gates. It's inside the walls. So this seminar will have 3 different areas. We're going to cover part 1 tonight, and each Wednesday we'll cover another part. So the first one is history's most murderous ideology, the psyche behind the Muslim murder machine. Okay, this one is a little bit depressing, but the other ones will be kind of encouraging because you realize they're standing on shifting sand. They don't really have the truth at all. The next one, next Wednesday, will be Islam's fabricated origins. That's where we're going to talk about how their claims don't add up historically, and they don't have any evidence to back up what they claim about the beginning of Muhammad, about when Islam started. It started actually much later, like 150 years later than what they say, and stuff like that. In fact, I'll break it to you, this is shocking, but Muhammad probably never existed. In fact, the Muhammad of Islam never existed, but maybe there was some kind of Arab war hero that they founded everything on, and then they made it up, okay? And the third Wednesday, we'll have Jesus and Islam, how Jesus is greater than Muhammad, even inside Islam. And this is what I was learning. As I learned that, I realized this is the topic I want to make on my dissertation, okay? So, this is 100,000 pages reduced down to 3 hours. The cream right on top, okay? That's what we're going to be dealing. I'm going to be feeding you the cream on top. So, history's most murderous ideology, the psyche or the mind behind the Muslim murder machine. Now, some of you may not know what this is, but this is in Mecca. It is the main shrine. It's called the Kaaba. The word Kaaba means cube, and in Arabic. And the people that are circling around there, they're wearing white robes, and I'm told they wear no underwear under. I don't know if that's an urban legend or it's true. I haven't found that out yet. But they're circumambulating around it 7 times when they first arrive for the Hajj pilgrimage, which is the 5th of the 5 pillars. Very few Muslims actually go on it. But if you go to it, when you go back to your home community, you're known as a Haji after that. So you're now an expert, and they can ask you questions. But they're going around 7 times at the beginning of the Hajj pilgrimage. Then they do some other rituals. Then they come back to the Kaaba and do another 7 circumambulations. And so they believe that directly above here in heaven, the angels are circumambulating around another Kaaba up in heaven. And on every Muslim has to pray 5 times a day to this place. And on the side of one of the corners of the Kaaba, the cube, is mounted a black stone idol. dedicated to the ancient pagan god that was the main god of this Kaaba before Islam started, named Hubal. And this is really a blasphemous thing because it's shaped like a cube, and the Holy of Holies in the temple is also shaped like a cube. And we are told that the Father's house in heaven will be a 1,400 mile by 1,400 mile by 1,400 mile cube as well. And so it's like striking right at the heart of what the God of the Bible, Yahweh, is his home. And it's trying to say that this is the real thing. And so what they do when they're going around, they try to push into the middle and kiss the black stone. They believe it used to be white, but because they've kissed it, it sucks their sins out and it became black. But it was an idol that was taken from Palmyra in Syria. This is some history, and it was dedicated to Hubal. Now this sounds a lot like someone you may know in the Old Testament, Baal, Hubal, okay? So the word Allah just means, it's come from the compound Al-Ilah, which means the God. So the name Allah is just a generic name. It's not a personal name. It just means the God, you know? And Hubal was the god, the chief god at the time before Islam. So in the Old Testament, Yahweh, through the prophets, condemned the people of Israel for falling away into idol worship, and one of the main antagonists was Baal. And the Israelites would do what the pagan nations around were doing in the same area, and that is to circumambulate around an Asherah pole. Asherah was the goddess of fertility, and it was shaped like a giant phallic symbol, and then they would worship Baal, the god of war and storms, okay? And so they would worship them together, male and female deities, and then they would circumambulate around it naked, and they would break out into a frenzy, and then they would have orgies, thus ensuring fertility in the land. Therefore, it was a very tempting thing to the Israelites when they fell away to that type of worship. And that's the same one that Gideon chopped down the Asherah pole, and also, Elijah killed the 400 prophets of Baal, okay? So here we are, we're dealing again with the god of war, Hubal. Now, if I tell this, what I just said to you, to any Muslim, they'll deny it, okay? And most Muslims don't know much about Islam. In fact, only 15% of the 1.5 billion people who are Muslims actually speak Arabic. And so they don't really know the true meaning of what is being said. They get very, very much a surface level understanding of Islam. They don't know the pagan history of Islam either. But you see, we are fighting the God of war. And it's something that Israel also has had to deal with in the past. And it's resurrected and reformed for 1,400 years in Islam. All right, let's go to the next slide. Some people may say, well, what is Islam? What does it mean? I mean, and people get confused. How do you say it? Is it Muslim or is it Islam or what is it? Well, it comes from the simple root SLM. You know, Hebrew had only consonants in the beginning, and later they added vowels. The scholars knew what it was saying, but they just added the vowels to make sure that they didn't make a mistake over time. And the Arabic was the same way. They just, because to save space, they just had the consonants, and later they added the vowels. So SLM is short for Islam, okay? And it just means submission. That's all it means. It means submission. And so their chief doctrine is you submit or you die. That's it. It's a good a mantra or a creed for a warrior, by the way. And then a Muslim is one who submits, okay? Mu on the front meaning a person. So that's what Islam is. Islam is submission, and one who submits is a Muslim. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to bring this down to go into the Middle East, into the area where all this happened. I'm going to show you a series of maps that will help you to get your mind there, because we didn't study this. This is the Byzantine history and the one that followed, which was Islam spreading. Okay, so this is like a Google map of Middle Earth. And you might say, wait a minute, this is not Lord of the Rings. No, this is Middle Earth. The word Mediterranean means Middle Earth. Medi for middle, and terra meaning earth, okay? So the area from North Africa on the south, and then Europe up on the north, and then the Middle East and Israel on the east. That is the Mediterranean basin. And much of history happened here. And so what we're talking about is Middle Earth. All right, now, many of you know that Paul's journeys from the back of your Bible, maybe you saw a map, and there are 3 concentric circles that go out and grow from each other, further out from the Holy Land, from Israel, out into what is today Turkey, but back then it was Anatolia, or it was Asia Minor, and even Paul grew up in Asia Minor. And so anyway, he repeated some of those things and went out a little farther and covered the cities of Revelation that are spoken about, the 7 cities in Revelation, and then further on into Greece and Athens and everything, and finally made a trip to Rome. So this is also kind of, I'm trying to get you zeroing in on where we're talking about. All right, now, as the Eastern Roman Empire spread, this map goes all the way up to 800 AD. The darker blue is the areas where Christianity spread during the first 300 years. And those are basically, no, don't go through that yet. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. Those are Christianity started in the cities, and then from there went out into the countrysides, okay? So the darker areas for the first 300 years, and then the lighter blue area is the next 300 years, from 300 to 600, and then the yellow areas are where it now spread further out from 600 to 800. So this is the world that the Arabs, when they swept out of the desert, this is the world they came into, dominated by Christianity. And even though the Roman Empire fell in Italy, the Eastern Roman Empire kept on going. And they actually kept back the Muslims for 1,000 years. And they did Western Europe a great favor. We're going to go to the next slide. And this one is a time-lapse map. Up on the top left corner will be the time counting up from 0 AD up until 2016. Then there'll be a list also on the left of the different Christianity spreading and the different enemies that attacked Christianity. And Christianity will be in white. And how do you know that how do I know all these colors? My wife told me the colors, okay? But so Christianity is white, and as the time is going, we're going to back out on the globe, and you're going to see it spreading all over the world, okay? But each enemy that comes in is a different color. So Islam will be green for envy, and then there's a brief period of the Tang Dynasty. Christianity had gone to China, and the Tang Dynasty wiped it out. I think that was orange, and then you have the Mongols sweeping in purple color, and then you have Islam still holding the area around the Middle East, still in green. And then at the very end, I think it's brown or red, sweeps in, and that's communism coming and attacking Christianity. But each time an enemy attacks, Christianity spreads back again. And this is 1 minute, and it's so beautiful. I love it. I love the music. So let it play, and then I'll narrate a little bit. Okay. So Christianity starts in the Middle East, in the Levant. It spreads all the way to Spain very quickly and up into France, across North Africa, then all the way to the east, all the way down the Silk Road. And there's like 400 there, 500. It's spreading, and all of a sudden, Islam comes in and destroys and takes over large portions of almost 2/3 of the Christian world was taken over by the Arabs, and then later Islam. But Christianity comes back. And then the Tang Dynasty eliminates some. And then it keeps spreading. And then all of a sudden, the Mongols sweep in and wipe out the entire Silk Road all the way into Eastern Europe. But Christianity comes back. And then Christianity goes to the New World, and it goes to the Americas and spreads there. And then goes back into Russia, into Asia, covering all the United States, into Africa, all of a sudden, communism sweeps in and destroys a large part. So that stops in 2016. So this is a visual image of representation of the battle that the church has been facing for 2,000 years. And it's still happening. If we kept it going for another 10 years to 2026, you'd see more. But to me, it's just so beautiful. I love it. So now, the next slide is what the Middle Earth and the Middle East looked like just prior to the Arab expansion, around 630 AD. And what you have here is the Eastern Roman Empire. I guess it's in purple or blue. And it's all around the Mediterranean basin over into Spain and all of Greece. And then even parts of Italy are controlled, not by the Western Romans, but by the Eastern Roman Empire, okay? And then all of Greece itself, Macedonia, and then over to Asia Minor, Israel, Jordan, and then all across North Africa. Some parts of North Africa were very lush, and they had a lot of great, olive groves and a lot of plantings. When the Arabs swept in, they destroyed it all. So anyway, by looking at this map, what I want you to notice is all along Africa, in Egypt, in Middle East, all along the Asian steppe up here, all the way into Europe, these, and even in parts of Spain, these are all tribal people. Tribal people. And these same tribes, the Asian steppes, kept making invasions into Europe for hundreds and hundreds, many centuries, invading into Europe. The Vandals, the Goths, and many that came in. And they also were attacking down into the Byzantine or the Eastern Roman Empire, Christian Empire. So that the Byzantines had to deal with these Asian steppe people always attacking. So they had really two fronts, because they were also fighting Persia over here. Persia, the final Persian Empire, was the Sassanid dynasty. This yellow over here, that was Persia. And the Greeks and the Persians have been fighting since before Alexander the Great. Okay? So the final battle that happened, it totally wiped out their armies, and their treasuries were spent. And these two places here, the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids, they were client states for Byzantium, or the Eastern Christian Roman Empire, and the Persians, okay? The Lakhmids for the Persians. They kept the desert Arabs from invading. These people were called Saracens, which means desert thief, okay? And of course, there were tents and nomadic tents of them spread throughout. They weren't just out in here. They were all the way up into the Asian steppe. But at least these two empires kept check on each other. Persia couldn't attack from this side on Byzantium. Byzantium couldn't attack Persia because they had client states. These were Arabs, and these Ghassanids were Christians. Even after Islam came in, the Ghassanids still remained Christians, okay? So what happened when this major war happened, there were also two major plagues that wiped out like a third of their population. So they didn't have any money for taxes. They lost a third of their population. Imagine if the United States had 350 million, and we lost, like 110 million, 105 million. We would be lacking our tax base, and things would start collapsing. That's what happened. They both had massive plagues that swept through, and then that war, and then the Persians attacked one more time when they had civil war, and they came and took over this area and devastated it and created a bunch of refugees. And then neither side had money to pay their client state. So that allowed the Arabs to just come in and take over. And as we'll learn on next Wednesday, it really wasn't an Arab Muslim conquest, it was an Arab takeover. They finally got to go into where they had been forbidden from going. Okay, so this is the historical picture of what led up to the spread of the Arabs, the Arab expansion, and then eventually it turned into Islam. All right, the next slide. This is a standard Islamic narrative map that shows their timeline. I titled it up there, Arab expansion, but anyway, the red there in Saudi Arabia is the Islamic world, or the Arabs, let's say, supposedly in Muhammad's time from 622 to 632. He died in 632. Keep that date in your mind, 632. Then, during the first four caliphs, Caliph just means supreme ruler. They spread it out more into the Orange area, and then that lasted 30 years, and they each died by violent means, according to their history. The only one we have any record of, really, is Omar. The rest we don't know anything about. They have no historical record, other than what the Islamic stories tell. And then the rest of the purple, I guess it was spread out for 90 years by the Umayyad caliphs based in Damascus. So what they say is that Islam started here in Mecca and Medina and spread out after Muhammad took over. Then when he died, they spread it out and took all of Arabia and then North Africa all the way to Persia. And then they moved the capital up to Syria, Damascus in Syria, and ruled for 90 years. Then they were wiped out. All the people, all the progeny of that dynasty, they hunted them down and killed all the young men. And then the Abbasids moved it to Baghdad. And that remained for 750 years, which is really, it was Persian land, because Iran and Iraq was Persia, okay? But the colonials subdivided that area, divide and conquer, you know. So the Islam became what is Islam when they moved to Baghdad, and that's when the scholarship started happening that created Muhammad, okay? So the next slide will kind of explain this even more. This is a timeline showing from 632, when Muhammad supposedly died, all the way to 2026. And so on this side here is the Rashidun Caliphate. The word Rashid means rightly guided, and every Muslim who's a serious Muslim wants the world to go back to this time in the 7th century, to be like Muhammad was and to be like his followers. This was their glorious time. Because why? Because this is when they were spreading the most. This is where they took over most of the land. This is only a 30-year period. Supposedly they were based in Medina. Then when they moved the capital up to Damascus, they ruled for about 90 years, and then they were wiped out, and then they moved the capital to Baghdad, and they ruled for 750 years. So Islam was actually really created, starting with the Umayyads. They started having the kernel of it, and then when they moved to Baghdad, and it was the Abbasid dynasty, that's where they really created Islam. Now, these are other caliphates. I don't want to talk much about it, except that when they killed all the Umayyads, some of them they went to Spain and started their own caliphate over there, and there are some other split-off caliphates. But the main thing is these three, and then this final one here, Ottoman Turks. After the Abbasids died, were wiped out, then the Ottomans came in, and they ruled from Asia Minor, and they kept fighting over and over again until 1453, where they finally broke through the walls of Constantinople and changed it to Istanbul. And then a corresponding empire, caliph, was up in India, the Mughal dynasty. They were the Mongols who had become Muslims. They went in there, and they were so bloody. They just wiped everybody out. 80 million Hindus died from them, okay? And it was just very, very nasty. So what happened here at this time, this was 624. After World War I, they had killed Armenians, 1.5 million Armenian Christians, and the Europeans forced them to dissolve the caliphate. As soon as that happened, Muslim Brotherhood was born. And their one goal, to remake the caliphate. So all this terrorism you hear and you see happening, it's all because of the Muslim Brotherhood and their desire to remake the caliphate. Because without the caliphate, they cannot enforce Sharia law around the world and have world domination. So Rashidun Caliphate, Umayyad Caliphate, Abbasid Caliphate, Ottoman Turk Caliphate. That's it right there. I wish somebody would have showed that to me. I had to really figure it out myself. But for 700 years, Christianity existed in the areas where Islam took over. And an example of what I'm talking about, of how widespread Christianity was, is that in 1008, began a purge of Christians by the Mad Caliph, okay? He's known as the Mad Caliph because he murdered, raped, and enslaved many Christians and destroyed 30,000 churches in Egypt and Syria alone. That's 400 years after the Arabs had taken over. That's how many churches were still there. Why did they keep the Christians there? Because they're so lazy, because Islam does not create a work ethic. They're so lazy that they needed the Christians to tax them so they could have some money. The rest of the money they were getting from their biannual raids that they would go out twice a year and raid and pillage and rape and take slaves, and that's how they would feed the army so they could stay in power. That's all that Islam has ever done, is raiding and taxing Christians. 30,000 churches destroyed in a few-year period. This church, by the way, is a beautiful church. It's in Bulgaria, and it was the foundation was 1882, and they finished it in 1912. It was built to celebrate them kicking out the Ottoman Turks out of Bulgaria. The postmodern times that we live in now, we're not in modern times. We use the word modern in a loose way, but philosophically, when we talking about the way people think, we are in postmodern times, okay? And it's easy to think of the region of the Middle East as though it has always been Islamic, and that it's the rightful domain of Islam. But history tells a different story, and even in recent times, included substantial percentages of Christians populations existing in the various Middle Eastern caliphates. And modern countries, despite ongoing persecution, so they've existed both in the Middle East and even other modern countries, okay? Large percentages. But in the period after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Muslim Empire, 1922, and terrible Armenian genocide, 1915, by Muslim Turks, where 1.5 million Armenian Christians were slaughtered and starved to death, it appeared as if Islam was waning. This also appeared to include the reduction of persecution. But since the discovery of oil wealth in Muslim lands, that's 57 Muslim countries, and a simultaneous rise in Islamic radicalism, a precipitous decline of the Middle Eastern Christian population has taken place. Here is a map showing the Armenian genocide, where Muslim Turks committed massacres and death marches to concentration camps. Now, the circles represent the number of murders. And so what we're looking at here is, this is Asia Minor, all the way there. This is all controlled by Greeks and then by Christian Eastern Roman people, and then the Muslims swept in and devastated it for hundreds and 500-600 years. They were kept being devastated all the time. And then when the Turks finally took over at Constantinople, they ruled the Ottoman Empire, and right at the end of the Ottoman Empire, they massacred Armenians. Between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea is the homeland of Armenia. This is the first Christian country ever. Started in 301. The first country ever the king submitted to Christianity and the whole nation became Christian in 301. The first country ever to become Christian, okay? And so they were spread out into what used to be Eastern, Greek-speaking Christian lands, and even when the Turks came in and took over, they still lived there, but those circles represent the number of people that died. They marched them down here into Syria, and many more people died there. It was so horrific that it made the Europeans mad, and they forced the Ottoman Turks to end the caliphate and start a modern state. As soon as that happened, the Muslim Brotherhood was born, okay? Here's a picture of them being marched. One picture of them being marched. And most of them probably just died by starvation. Others were just massacred and thrown in graves and, mass graves and everything. So, in the decades around the year 2000, Christian Middle East population decline has occurred at levels which could only be called a genocide. This has also included massive levels of displacement, which it seems the world has ignored. In the Middle East, this is now a quote, in the Middle East, the very survival of Christianity as a living religion is in doubt. Though it is the birthplace of Christianity and the place where its influence prevailed for 700 years after Christ, a genocide has taken place when one considers just a century ago, 20% of the region's people were Christians. Today, the figure is below 5%. Imagine, just since 2000. So many Christians have been either killed or chased away, and the world hasn't blinked an eye. The news media hasn't said anything about it. It's like there's just a blank there. Nobody knows about it. You see, Islam is a death cult. This letter here is the Arabic letter for N, Nun, and it's what the ISIS fighters would paint on the doors of Syrians and Iraqi Christians to designate them for extortion, jizya, rape, murder. And so they would mark off the places because they knew, the local people knew where the Christians were. They marked it off, and so either the Christians fled or they were murdered or raped or extorted or whatever. And it stands for Nazrani or Nazarene. It's become the symbol of a cry for the Christians, silent cry against persecution. There is also a shocking increase in the persecution of Christians globally. Christian persecution NGO Open Doors revealed in its 2019 World Watch List called Report on Anti-Christian Oppression that approximately 245 million Christians living in the top 50 countries suffer high levels of persecution or worse. The greatest level of persecution occurs in the Muslim countries. There's 57 Muslim countries. The greatest level occurs in them. As Harvard professor Samuel Huntington stated, Islam has bloody borders. So thus, whenever viewing the history of the so-called Islamic countries in the Middle East, it is important to factor in the Christian and Jewish presence and precedents, they preceded, and the continued presence of Christian influence. It is inaccurate to accept the standard Islamic narrative that the Middle East was always Muslim, that Jesus was a Muslim, and that Muslims are justified in purging their lands of kafirs. And we're going to learn what that word means. You're a kafir, I'm a kafir. It means an infidel, an unbeliever in Islam and Allah and Muhammad. After all, Islam has not really been Islamic for as long as the Muslim scholars claim either. So, the history of the most murderous ideology. Now, we know of World War II and what happened there with communism. In Russia, more than 62 million dead when you count over the entire time, including Stalin's reign. And then communism with Mao, 60 million. And then with communism light, that is Hitler, socialism. Socialism is communism light, by the way. The Nazi stands for National Socialist Party. They were socialists. But yet, the liberals will tell you, let's just say, I'm a conservative, I'm a Christian. The other side will tell you that socialism is somehow better, and that the right wing was the Nazis. No, they were not right wing. They were socialists, okay? So they killed all those people, but Islam far outstripped what these mass murderers did in the last century, okay? More than 270 million people slaughtered by Islam over 1,400 years. It's the biggest murder machine in world history. And this is so important to understand. They're not going to change. This is their history. This is what they know. This is what Islam inspires them to do. And so if you put it on a chart, Dr. Bill Warner and his website, politicalislam.com, he tallies it up. And of course, this is what can be counted. There are other people that were never counted, okay? But that adds up to 120 million Africans, because of the slave trade. You know, the slave trade in East and North Africa was going on. It's been going on even before Islam. It was going on for the entire 1,400 years of Islam. And it's still going on. Right now, there's more than 400,000 slaves in North Africa, more than any time that existed in the West African slave trade, is existing right now. And the world not even talking about it. Okay? But the reason why all these slaves from East and North Africa died is because they would castrate the males and march them out to the coast, and many died on the way because they wanted to send them to be in the harems to take care of all the women they were taking. 2/3 were women, and they were for sex slaves. 1/3 were men to manage the women. And then in the West African slave trade, exactly the opposite. 2/3 were men to run the farms, and 1/3 was to reproduce. But Christians, 60 million, as I said before, Hindus, 80 million, and this word Hindu Kush, by the way, the word Kush means funeral pyre, because up in that area is where so many millions of Hindus were slaughtered by the Mughal dynasty that they named it the Hindu funeral pyre, okay? And then 10 million Buddhists, adding up to 270 million. In India, they would take the heads of the Hindus and mount them in monuments. And along walls, all along a road, they put heads of the Hindus mortared them in the wall. They were so bloody and so terrible. Some of you may have heard this term before, Tamerlane. It stands for Tamir the Lame, because when he was a young boy out on the Asian steppe, he was trying to steal a sheep of a farmer, and the farmer shot him with an arrow, and it hit his hip, and it made him lame for the rest of his life. So he was known as Tamir the Lame. He became a mighty general. This was kind of like at the end of the Mongol period, and he murdered more than 17 million people. One town in India, he besieged it, and they refused to submit. So then when he broke in the walls, he stacked up 40,000 heads in a big pyramid outside the town. The same thing happened in Spain and in so many places where the Muslims went. They would make a huge pyramid stack of heads of all the people they killed. Islam claims to be the religion of peace. That's a deception, okay? But if you don't agree, they will kill you. That's the attitude, okay? Now, I could do session after session on the Quran, but let me just summarize it in one slide here. You see, the problem is not the radicals. The problem is that violence and jihad is endemic, or it's inbuilt into their most sacred text, which is the Quran. Okay? So here are 13 doctrines that you can see that radical Islam follows, but they're in the Quran that all of the moderate Muslims read as well. Number 1, you can rape, marry, and divorce prepubescent girls. 2, you can enslave for sex and work. 3, you can beat sex slaves, work slaves, and wives. 4, you will need 4 Muslim male witnesses to prove a rape. 5, you Muslims will kill Christians and Jews if they do not convert or pay jizya tax. 6, crucify and amputate non-Muslims. 7, you, meaning the Muslims, will kill non-Muslims and receive 72 virgins in heaven. That verse is chapter 9, verse 111, so it's like 9:11. Number 8, you will kill anyone who leaves Islam. 9, you will behead non-Muslims. 10, you will kill and be killed for Allah. That's the verse of the sword. 11, you will terrorize non-Muslims. 12, you will steal from non-Muslims. That's an entire chapter 8, talking about booty and spoils of war. 13, you will lie to strengthen Islam. That's called taqiyya, and it is official doctrine in Islam that you can legally lie. Allah permits it, He likes it. You lie to promote Islam or to promote your own family. This is what Islam teaches. It's not what the radicals teach. It's what Islam teaches. The radicals, by the way, are the real Muslims. Just like in Christianity, we have radical Christians. You've heard that said before. And we have, lukewarm Christians or whatever. The radicals are the real believers. Same in Islam. Same in Islam. Now, if you compare words devoted to political violence in the Bible compared to the Islamic trilogy, which is the Quran, the Sirah, the biography, and the Hadith, which are the stories. If you compare that, in the New Testament, there's 0 words dedicated to political violence. In the Hebrew Old Testament, because they were taking over the land and God commanded them to wipe out the tribes and drive, most of them were just driven out. There are about 34,000 words dedicated to that type of language. And then in the Islamic trilogy, their sacred books, 328,000 words dedicated to political violence. Okay? So there's no equivocation, none whatsoever. Just in recent poll in Europe, in the years 2000 to 2023, just in Western Europe, these are a list of different, at the bottom, different types of ideologies or belief systems, okay, starting from the right and reading left. Judaism, Zionism, Christianity, Sikhism, Tamil, Shinto, Buddhism, Hindu, other. Incels is involuntary celibates. These are young men who stick online all the time, and there's a new term in our age called incels, okay? Sometimes they're violent. White supremacy, and then the last bar there on the left, Islam. There's no comparison to other political violence compared to Islam, none whatsoever. That's more than 10,000 just in a 24-year period. In Western Europe. Okay, so now the next slide, these are 2 slides from a website called thereligionofpeace.com. This is Islamic terror attacks since 9/11. This is, if you go there today, you'll see the numbers bigger, but it's right around 49,000 at this point. Okay, I had copied this slide from, maybe while I was doing my dissertation. So the other side, on the right-hand side, is the Worldwide Jihad Report in April 2025. That's just 1 month right there. The number of attacks worldwide is 188. The number killed is 1,300. The number injured, 850. Suicide blasts, 1. And countries that all this took place in is 16 different countries. So you see, it's relentless. They never stop. They just keep doing it. That's how they stack bodies. Sorry to use harsh language, but I need to, match my language with what's really happening, okay? If you'll forgive me. Many people try to deflect the issue, and they try to say, well, it's just radical Islam. Listen, radical Islam is 15% of 1.5 billion people. That is hundreds of millions of people. That's a lot of people, okay? And so it's not like it's only the radicals, because the moderates are reading the same material. When they go on their Friday sermon at the mosque and they pray their prayers, they receive the same stuff the radicals are receiving, and then they go out on the city streets in the Middle East, and they're all glassy-eyed and red-eyed and angry because they've been fired up to hate the kafirs, okay? So the moderates are basically saying the same thing, but in a deceptive way as the radicals. There is no equivocation between jihad and the Crusades. This is a jihad battle map made by Dr. Bill Warner on politicalislam.com, and you can go on YouTube and you can type in jihad battle map and look it up. It's Dr. Bill Warner, and he shows it. It's in his long video. It's also in just a short video that he made. And you see these dots here. These are the battles that have taken place in Middle Earth. And it's not even showing the battles outside in Asia and all that stuff. But just around here, these things populate little by little over about a 45-second period that you can see them growing, okay? And he compares this. This is the type of battling. It's just relentless. It never stops, never stops, never stops. This is all now before, the modern countries of Europe were formed, okay? And even into that period. But then you compare that to the Crusade battle map, and there it is on the top. Now, comparing them, the Crusades were defensive. They lasted 300 years, and over 800 years ago, they stopped. Whereas in jihad, they've been offensive. Remember, they took over Christian lands, right? And then lasted 1,400 years, and they're still active today. Here it is blown up a little bit more. You can see just a few dots on the crusade map. In the crusades, a total of around 1 million people on both sides died. That's it. No comparison to the number of people that have died because of jihad. That is why I started Islam Expose as a ministry. I was starting it in Kenya, and then we felt like the timing was right now for us to transition to our second phase of ministry, and I started my doctorate degree. And so that's it's supposed to be moving, but we didn't give you the video, but it spins around like this. But basically, I feel a great burden, in addition to teaching theology, Bible, and ministry courses in Bible schools, and also doing apologetics. I feel a great burden to be able to share this in Bible schools around the world with ministers, as well as with church people everywhere, because I want them to be prepared for what's coming, okay? And we have the tools we need to counteract this, and also prepare ourselves. Sometimes maybe God has not allowed a Muslim to come across our path because we're not ready to talk to them. But if we learn some of this stuff, you'll have the tools you need to strike up a conversation. Amen? So now, some people may say, a critical, make a critical argument against what I'm doing or what any of us should be doing, which is to confront our greatest enemy, historically speaking. Islam claims to be the religion of peace. Why can't we agree to let them have their way and we have our way? President George Bush is the one who mistakenly called Islam the religion of peace. He did this in order to quell violent outrage and revenge in the USA against Muslims after 9/11. Since then, Muslim apologists have co-opted this idea to practice taqiyya, that is strategic lying, upon the West in order to obscure the truth. I'll give you one example. In 9/11, afterwards, they were interviewing Muslims on the different news channels, and these Muslims would come there and they say, we believe just like you believe. We believe, our number one belief is there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. That is not what they believe. That's the Shahada, and that's not what they say. They say there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. If you say that with faith, you become a Muslim. It's called the Shahada. They deceive, okay? In 9/11, people were being deceived left and right. They didn't realize what had hit them. History gives a different picture. Islam is the biggest murder machine in history, having slaughtered 270 million people in 1,400 years of jihad. Even Ayatollah Khomeini will agree. He'll disagree with George Bush. This is a quote from him. I spit on the souls of those who say Islam is a religion of peace. Even annually, there are 10,000 acid attacks in Muslim lands. You see, maybe there's a beautiful woman and she lets her hijab or her veil come down a little bit. A Muslim man sees her. He gets jealous of her because he knows he can't have her. So he goes and gets acid and throws it on her. He blinds her and she becomes deformed for the whole rest of her life. There were two Christian young girls who were in Zanzibar. They were doing mission work there, helping a local church or something, and they were there, and Muslim men came and threw acid on them. They had to be rushed back to the United States and have treatment, but they're deformed for the rest of their life. Just in the UK, just only in 2022, more than 1,200 acid attacks took place in the UK, and nobody ever talks about it. It's hidden. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. You heard Trump when he was saying, we killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. You know how he was saying it was pretty funny. Okay? He was the founder of ISIS, and he did what Muhammad and his followers have done for 14 centuries. His education proves he knew exactly what Islam requires. He had a BA in Islamic studies, an MA in Islamic studies, and a PhD in Islamic studies. What ISIS did is what Islam requires. The radicals are the true believers. He knew exactly what Islam requires. Okay? Now, Muhammad's last words were spoken in a hadith, in a story. And Aisha, his young wife, recorded it. And he was dying. He died over a slow two-year period because a Jewish woman poisoned him by feeding him lamb. He ordered her to make a meal after he had slaughtered her entire family. So in the back of the tent, she was making the lamb and she poured some poison in there. He ate it, and his other followers that were with him didn't eat it. And then he suffered for 2 years, agonizing, slow death. And so he's on his last words as he's covering himself and, getting cold and chills, getting cold and getting hot. And then he curses the Jews and the Christians. He says, "May Allah curse the Jews and Christians, for they built the places of worship at the graves of their prophets." That's the last words he ever said. Cursing the Christians and Jews, according to what the Muslims believe. Okay? Oddly enough, he is buried inside a mosque, the second holiest site in Islam, called the Masjid al-Nabiwa. That is the Prophet's mosque. There's Mecca, the first holiest site, and then that site is the second holiest site in Islam. And then the Dome of the Rock, the third one. So he is buried inside of their places of worship. Just like what he cursed them, he also did the same thing. And you see this picture right here. Behind that metal wall there, the gates or whatever, is where the grave is. And Muslims are told they're not supposed to pray to Muhammad, but what are they doing? They're praying to Muhammad. Islam brainwashes Muslims. In fact, for them to really come out of Islam, it's like they have to be deprogrammed, okay? Every day they are supposed to pray 5 times a day, okay? Early morning before the sun rises and all the way to when the sun sets. 5 times a day. In that prayer, they have to say the opening 7 verses of the Quran called the Fatiha, Al-Fatiha, which means the opening. They have to repeat it. And in the 5 prayers they do every day, they repeat those words 17 times a day, okay? 17 times a day. They repeat this opening words of the Quran. And in it, it says, it curses the Jews and the Christians, calling the Jews those who God is angry with, and the Christians those who have gone astray. So every day, every Muslim, no matter whether they're radical or they're moderate, they curse Christians and Jews 17 times a day. This is right at the heart of Islam. It's one of the key rituals they do every single day, 17 times a day. Someone might try to criticize an effort to confront Islam, and they might say, it seems like you're attacking Muslims.
12 minutes.
What gives you the right to focus on Islam's negative points? Shouldn't you just show them the love of Jesus and leave it up to God? Listen, exposing Islam is not attacking Muslims. And we might as well even say, we could even say, ask Christians why they don't think or pray much for 20% of humanity. So it's very important that we confront the lies that they have. Only showing them the love of Jesus is impotent if you ignore the lies that bind them. People and churches in the West repeat the mantra, why are Muslims doing this? It's important to know why. And we need to stop projecting our own belief system on them. What way we think as Christians and as Westerners is not how Muslims think. That's not how they've been trained. And not only that, but Islam is still practicing beheading. In Revelation chapter 20, it talks about those who have come out of the Great Tribulation, and it says they had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus. So nobody in history has done beheading except the Mongols, and they became Muslims, and the Muslims. It makes me think that it's likely Islam will have something to do with the Antichrist kingdom that comes. So what is the psyche behind the Muslim murder machine? It's both kafir and jihad. On this cartoon here, it's saying, the man is telling his family, the army with swords is outside, and he's saying, there's a strong Arabian army on the door, and we basically have 3 options. We pay them an expensive tax, such as jizya, or they slaughter me, steal our possessions, enslave our children, and rape our daughter. Or we convert to a new, merciful, and rightful religion. And that's exactly the mentality that is ingrained in Muslims when they study Islam. When you enter Islam, this top slide here, they're all hugs and kisses. But when you want to leave Islam, they want to kill you or chop your head off. I had to even help save a Somali guy who had become a Christian, and his family tried to kill him in Kenya. Why is Islam dangerous? Islam maintains a 1,400-year history of operating according to a conquering political ideology, masquerading as a religion. Islam denies the validity of the Judeo-Christian belief system and values, while at the same time claiming it originated from them. Islam exhibits total animosity toward postmodern values, freedom of thought and expression, democracy, capitalism, scientific method, gender and racial equality, and even historical reality. Islam has as its stated goal total world domination and implementation of Sharia law, replacing all legal, economic, religious, and cultural systems with Islam. Islam is dangerous because it was founded upon an anti-historical ideology and maintains an anti-historical worldview. Islam has never historically spread by conversion, but by violence, invasion, migration, and high birth rates. And Islam doctrine and Sharia law maintain as endemic behavioral practice of Muslims worldwide both jihad, slavery, oppression, and taxation, that's jizya of unbelievers, that is kafirs, and inequality of women, and taqiyya, that's official sanctioned lying. So what is this thing about kafir? Are you a kafir? This is Islam's obsession. 60% of Islamic sacred writings are devoted to concerns about the kafir. Kafir equals an unbeliever in Allah and Islam, sometimes called an infidel, meaning without faith. The word kafir is usually translated as unbeliever, but the real meaning is one who covers or conceals the known truth. I'm suspicious we may get our English word cover from kafir. They cover the truth. That's what they believe. They believe that, according to their mindset, they believe that kafirs know Islam is true but deny it. They believe that you know the truth about Allah, Muhammad, and Islam. That's what they believe. And when they look at you, they've been told over and over again, they're hiding the truth, they're covering it. They know the truth, but they're hiding it, they're covering it, they're a kafir. The Quran says the kafir may be mocked, deceived, plotted against, hated, raped, enslaved, tortured, and slaughtered mercilessly. What Muhammad did and said, chopping off the heads and making sex slaves, can be done to any kafir. Muslims are consumed by rejection they feel from the kafir and possessed by hatred to eliminate all kafirs. Islam's main goal is to force the world to submit to Allah, Muhammad, and Sharia law. The kafir stands in their way of their goal. We must be converted or slaughtered. We must stop projecting Christian ideals on how Islam thinks. That's not how they think. They don't think like we think. Now, Islam's trilogy issues. 60% of their sacred writings are devoted to talking about the kafir. What would happen if the Bible was talking, 60% was talking about those who reject Jesus, who reject Yahweh, and reject Christianity? How would we be? If the chance that 60% of any message you would receive in church would be talking about those who reject us, I think it would be psychotic, okay? And what do you do to a kafir? You commit jihad on them. 31% of those same writings, the sacred writings, the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith, are devoted to jihad, what you do to a kafir. What if 31% of our writings in the Bible were devoted to waging war against those who refuse our belief? That's what they have. And that is why Islam really can't be reformed unless they're willing to take out those verses. Then maybe Islam could be reformed. Islam teaches Muslims to view the kafir as negist, which is filth. They look at us and they've been trained over and over again. We are filth. That's how they think about it. And I can't emphasize enough, it's not like they were born and they came to a Christian land and now they just think we're all wonderful. They have been trained from birth to think of the Kafirs as filth, okay? Now, I was pleasantly surprised the other day when Pete Hegseth was doing some training with his soldiers to inspire them, because he used to be a great soldier and everything. And he had tattooed, and this caused a bit of a stir. Under his arm, he has the word kafir tattooed in Arabic under his arm right here. But what the world didn't catch, and the news media missed it, is that right above there's the word Deus vult. Okay? Deus vult in Latin means God wills it. So above kafir is the word Deus vult. Deus vult is what the Pope who gave his sermon in 1095 to kick off the Crusades, he inspired the knights and the Christians there because of all the atrocities that were happening to the Christians on pilgrimage. He inspired them to go and take back Jerusalem for the sake of God and to protect the pilgrims. And so they all stood up with one voice and they shouted, "God wills it! God wills it." So on Pete Hegseth's arm is "God wills it" and kafir. So at least we know that the Secretary of War knows his stuff. Okay. Let me leave you with one story. Just the other day, New Year's Day 2025, in New Orleans, there was a huge radical Muslim attack, okay? He drove his car through the city streets of New Orleans while they were reveling during New Year's Day in the middle of the night. And here he is beforehand scoping the area, that over there, he's scoping the area there. That's what he looks like on the bottom right corner. And he killed 14 people and injured a bunch of others. His name was Abdul Ramin Jabbar. And the shocking thing is that he grew up as a Muslim in Beaumont, Texas. And he's a U.S. Army veteran. So it didn't matter that he grew up in the United States. He had our culture, and he's even supported the U.S. military. In his truck, he had bombs that he never used. And they learned that he was inspired by ISIS. The FBI, they looked at his Facebook page, and they said that Jabbar said these words: "I originally planned to harm my family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the war between the believers and the kafirs, the disbelievers. These are the kafirs down here. They're the ones that they hate. And when you talk about being radicalized, the difference is going from a moderate Muslim to a radical is now you decide you're going to do something about the kafirs. That's the difference. We belong to the house of war. Okay, Dar al-Harb. And the Muslims are in the house of peace. Islam is a supersessionist religion, and it's motivated by world domination. Islam is primarily a political ideology with a religious veneer, okay? So when we come back, I will share a story, some quick teaching about Abraham and how the Muslims claim Abraham in order to legitimize Islam and supplant Christianity, but we're running out of time now. But simply to say, they are supersessionists, meaning they say they have the final book, the Revelation, and the final prophet, and they're superseding Christianity. That's another aspect of who they are. But I'll show you that actually they are not an Abrahamic faith. You probably heard this before. Even people say it they just repeat it like a mantra. You know, the three Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. That's not true. Islam is not an Abrahamic faith. So, like I said, this is going to be a little bit depressing, but at least it's truthful. It looks at history, and it makes us understand. This is not accidental. This is not like, oopsie, here they are. No, they've been coming for 1,400 years. And what we're going to study on the next 2 Wednesdays is that their origins are not what they say they are, meaning their foundation is just in tatters. okay? And this has only been discovered since the 1970s. Scholars have got in and looked at their documents, and they've realized this. And then finally, we're going to look and see how Jesus can be used. Knowing what Islam says about Jesus and what Christianity says about it, you can match the two and help a Muslim to realize what they're thinking about Jesus is not right, and you can reach them. So, Pastor, can I open up for 1 or 2 minutes? And if you need to go, you can just ask me a question if you have something. I know I've said a lot.